He's a great player. Kevin does a lot of things well. Well, Dennis is the key to our team. I knew last year once we picked up Dennis and seen how good he is, we knew that we was going to win a championship. But we knew there's a lot of good teams out there. But with the way Dennis plays, we needed that. We need a guy come in and hit the shot like he does, play the good defense, and do the all-around game. Dennis Johnson is definitely the best player I've ever played with in my life. That is, but Dennis makes me better. You know, that's why I say that, because he gets the ball to me in my spots. Tiny Archibald used to do that, but Dennis does it better than anybody I've ever played with.
Larry Bird didn't just play the game, he saw through it. He broke opponents down with vision, timing, and pure competitive will. And while he never shied away from trash talk or hard fouls, Bird held deep respect for players who brought the same intensity, skill, and basketball IQ that he demanded of himself. He didn't throw around praise. If Larry Bird admired you, it meant something. It meant you earned it. Not with highlight dunks or empty stats, but with consistency, grit, and the kind of basketball that cut through all the noise. Bird respected winners, floor generals, quiet assassins, and players who didn't just want to score. They wanted to understand the game and bend it to their will. In this video, we're diving into the 6 players Larry Bird named as his favorites, not just because they were great, but because they represented the kind of basketball Bird believed in. Let's get into it. But before proceeding, please take a second and subscribe and like this video. It will be very motivation for us. Larry Bird didn't just respect Magic Johnson. He couldn't escape him. Their paths collided before the NBA ever entered the picture. In 1979, Magic's Michigan State Spartans defeated Bird's undefeated Indiana State Sycamores in the NCAA championship. Still the most watched college basketball game in history. Bird walked off that court without speaking to anyone. And when he looked back years later, he admitted losing that game still hurts. That wasn't just a college title. It was the birth of a lifelong comparison. Magic had taken the spotlight first, and Bird would spend the next decade trying to wrestle it away. Their rivalry was never casual. It was obsessive. Bird studied Magic not out of admiration, but necessity. The NBA in the 80s revolved around them. Boston versus Los Angeles, Celtic green versus Laker gold. But more than that, it was IQ versus instinct, grit versus charisma. Bird once described it like this: Magic smiled at you while he took your heart out. I just did it with a scowl. Magic stood 6'9", a point guard who looked like a power forward, but moved like a conductor. He didn't dominate with force. He dictated with feel. Defenders couldn't rush him. Traps didn't faze him. He played like time belonged to him. Bird, the cold technician from French Lick, was exacting and deliberate. His game was built on angles, leverage, and unshakable confidence. But even he admitted there was nothing like Magic on a fast break. You just hoped he didn't embarrass you. When they met in the NBA Finals in 1984, 1985, and 1987, the games were tactical wars. Every possession was a chess match layered with emotion. Magic's style frustrated Bird not because it was flashy, but because it worked. No-look passes that found teammates in stride, post-up moves against smaller defenders, floaters that felt improvised but always landed. In that 1984 Finals, Bird finally got the upper hand. The Celtics won in 7 games, and Bird out-dueled Magic in Game 7 with 20 points and 12 rebounds. But the joy was complicated. Bird later said, "I didn't just want to beat the Lakers. I wanted to beat Magic." It went both ways. Magic once admitted that whenever he saw Bird's name on the schedule, he didn't sleep right the night before. There was no easy night between them. They brought out something in each other, not just greatness, but vulnerability. When Magic made a critical mistake in the 1984 Finals, a late-game turnover, the media called him Tragic Johnson. Bird never piled on. He knew how thin the margin was at that level. After years of circling each other from opposite coasts, everything shifted in 1992. They were teammates now, captains of the Dream Team. Bird's body was failing him, but he still stood tall next to Magic in Barcelona. One morning during practice, Bird sat quietly on the sideline while Magic and Jordan went back and forth in a scrimmage. When asked why he wasn't joining in, Bird said, "The only thing I'm doing here is keeping the peace between them." That line drew laughs, but it also reflected a reality. The rivalry had become a brotherhood. It was during that Dream Team run that their relationship truly softened. Magic later said, "We'd never really talked much until that Converse commercial. Then we got to know each other. And once we did, we were the same." Bird agreed. "We didn't realize we had the same drive, the same pain, the same pride." When Larry Bird talks about Magic now, The numbers almost fade into the background, even though they're staggering. 5 NBA titles, 3 league MVPs, over 10,000 assists. A player who revolutionized his position and altered how teams thought about pace and playmaking. But for Bird, it wasn't about stats. It was about the intangible presence. The pressure Magic created before tip-off. The sense that if you blinked, you'd be on a highlight reel. Bird didn't just have to defend Magic, he had to keep up with him mentally, emotionally, and strategically. He once said, "There's nobody I'd rather lose sleep over." Today, when Bird lists his favorite players, Magic Johnson isn't just a name. He's the only opponent who became a lifelong peer, a man who challenged his identity, cracked his armor, and still earned his friendship. Because Magic didn't just compete with Larry Bird, he completed him.
I can remember the first time I laid eyes on Magic Johnson. We played on an all-star team back in college. I could not believe what I was seeing in practice. I actually thought I was a bad judge of talent because neither one of us got to play in the games. But I can remember going home and telling my older brother, I just seen the best basketball player I'm probably ever going to see in my life.
Before Larry Bird ever played a minute in the NBA, he already knew who Julius Erving was. Everyone did. In the late 70s, Dr. J was more than a basketball player. He was a cultural figure, a symbol of grace and athletic brilliance that made even non-fans stop and watch. He was what Bird, a college star at Indiana State, was aspiring to become. A franchise cornerstone, a fan favorite, a walking highlight reel, but most of all, a winner. By the time Bird entered the league in 1979, Erving had already been a professional for 8 years. First in the ABA, where he won 2 championships and 3 MVPs, and then in the NBA, where he helped legitimize the merger between the 2 leagues. But age hadn't dulled his explosiveness. Erving was still leaping from just inside the free throw line, still hanging in the air like gravity took a coffee break. Bird had to go through him, not just to earn credibility, but to learn what it meant to lead. Their first matchup came in November 1979. The Celtics beat the Sixers by 2, and Bird scored 25 points. But it wasn't just about the box score. Bird later recalled being awestruck by Erving's fluidity and calm demeanor. "He made everything look easy. I was grinding for every bucket," he floated. Over the next several seasons, the Celtics and 76ers would develop one of the fiercest rivalries of the decade. Between 1980 and 1985, Boston and Philadelphia met in the Eastern Conference Finals 4 times. Each series was physical, emotional, and bitter. Within the chaos, there was mutual admiration between the 2 stars. Erving and Bird weren't stylistic twins. Dr. J soared, Bird dissected. One glided above the rim, the other punished you with footwork, pump fakes, and angles. But what brought them together was their shared commitment to team-first basketball, their obsessive preparation, and their refusal to back down. In 1981, the Sixers led the Eastern Conference Finals 3-1. Boston clawed back to win in 7. Bird hit the go-ahead shot in Game 7 with 1 minute and 3 seconds left, a 12-foot bank shot that silenced the Spectrum. After the game, Erving didn't sulk. He praised Bird's poise. "He's got that clutch instinct. He'll punish you if you give him a crack." That was the difference. Erving didn't mind giving credit, even to his rivals, but things weren't always friendly. In one of the most infamous incidents between 2 superstars, Bird and Erving nearly came to blows on November 9, 1984. Bird had been lighting up the Sixers, 42 points midway through the 3rd quarter, and Erving, frustrated, grabbed him by the neck. Both players were ejected. The footage shows Bird throwing a punch, Erving throwing one back, and teammates scrambling to break it up. It was uncharacteristic, especially for Dr. J, who rarely let emotions boil over. But that moment, in some ways, symbolized what Bird represented to his generation. He wasn't just a rival, he was a disruptor. He made legends feel pressure. Despite the scuffle, their respect endured. After that altercation, both men expressed regret, and in the years that followed, their relationship matured into one of mutual admiration. In 1983, when Erving finally won his NBA championship, Bird publicly praised him. He deserved it. He's one of the best to ever play this game that was significant. Bird didn't hand out compliments easily, especially not to players who stood in his way, and Erving returned that respect. In later interviews, he consistently listed Bird among the most complete players he'd ever faced. You couldn't relax on defense with Larry. If you turned your head, he was gone. If you stayed close, he passed. He was 2 plays ahead. There's something else that set Erving apart for Bird. It wasn't just what Dr. J did on the court, it was how he carried himself. Even when games got ugly, Erving had a kind of elegance, a leader's calm that kept his teammates focused. For Bird, who often wore his emotions on his sleeve, Erving's composure was something to admire. Off the court, their bond continued to evolve. They became staples at NBA All-Star Weekend. They sat together at Hall of Fame ceremonies, and when the league celebrated its 75th anniversary, Bird placed Erving right where he'd always been in his mind, near the very top. By then, the legacy was clear. Dr. J had left an imprint on Bird's game, Bird's mindset, and Bird's vision of greatness. Not because they were the same, but because they both understood what it meant to carry a franchise, to deal with expectations, and to keep delivering under pressure. So when Larry Bird names Julius Erving as one of his all-time favorite players, it's not just about highlights or stats. It's about admiration forged through battles, bruises, and eventually brotherhood. Because even legends have legends. And for Bird, Julius Erving was exactly that. Before Larry Bird ever passed, shot, or competed in an NBA game, he already knew who Oscar Robertson was. Everybody did. For a kid growing up in the basketball heartland of Indiana, Oscar wasn't just a player. He was the prototype, a symbol of what was possible when talent met discipline. The legacy of Oscar Robertson stretches far beyond his numbers, though even those are hard to ignore. The first player in league history to average a triple-double over an entire season, long before pace and space basketball inflated stat sheets. That was 1961-62, 30.8 points, 12.5 rebounds, 11.4 assists, all while operating in a half-court league with hand-checking, no three-point line, and far less spacing. For Bird, who grew up idolizing smart, all-around players, Oscar wasn't just a star. He was the blueprint. Their playing days didn't overlap. By the time Bird entered the league in 1979, Oscar had already retired, but that didn't stop Bird from recognizing his impact. In interviews over the years, Bird repeatedly named Robertson as one of the greatest to ever touch a basketball, not just for what he did, but for how he did it. There was a directness to Oscar's game. He wasn't flashy for the sake of being flashy. He controlled tempo, dictated pace, and imposed his will on the defense. All things Bird himself became famous for. Oscar could operate from the post, set up teammates with bullet passes, or rise up and hit a 15-footer with a defender draped over him. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just pure command. Bird once said of Oscar, he made the game look like chess. Everyone else was still playing checkers. That's high praise, especially coming from one of the most cerebral players to ever take the court. But Bird didn't just admire Oscar's game, he admired his mindset. Oscar Robertson entered the NBA in 1960 during a time of extreme racial tension. As a black athlete in a still segregated America, he wasn't just playing against defenders, he was battling systemic injustice. He spoke up, he organized, he challenged the league's treatment of players, and became president of the NBA Players Association. He fought for free agency rights, eventually leading to the 1976 ruling that opened the door for modern player movement. For Bird, who valued loyalty, but also respected players standing up for what they believed, this mattered. It wasn't about politics. It was about professionalism, about carving out a better future for the game. When people talk about the modern era of NBA superstars having more freedom, more power, more leverage, it starts with Oscar. And Bird understood that. He didn't just respect Robertson's numbers. He respected the trail he blazed. On the court, Robertson's teams were always competitive. He spent his prime with the Cincinnati Royals, often putting up incredible numbers, but running into dynasties like the Celtics and Sixers. His only NBA championship came late, in 1971, alongside a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with the Milwaukee Bucks. Even then, it was Oscar's experience and steadiness that kept that team balanced. Bird later reflected, he didn't care about flash. He just wanted to win, and he'd do whatever it took. Score, pass, defend, slow it down, speed it up. You couldn't rattle him. In that way, Oscar resembled Bird more than most modern stars. He wasn't interested in highlight reels. He wanted control, precision, execution, and he expected the same from his teammates. Off the court, Oscar was known for his sharpness, not just intellect, but intensity. He didn't suffer fools, and in that, Bird found a kindred spirit. Both men were introverts by nature. Both kept tight circles, and both were known for expecting a lot, from themselves and from those around them. There's also a deeper connection. Indiana. Both Bird and Robertson came from that same basketball-obsessed state. Robertson grew up in Indianapolis, Bird in French Lick. Their upbringings were different, their paths unique, but they both knew what it meant to play ball in gyms where every possession mattered and every play could earn, or lose, you respect. Bird often pointed to Indiana as the cradle of basketball, and Oscar was its first true icon. In many greatest-of-all-time debates, Oscar's name has slipped off the casual fan's radar. But not for Bird. Whenever asked to rank the game's true elites, those who changed how basketball is played, Bird always made room for Robertson, not out of nostalgia, but because of truth. There were guys who put up numbers, Bird once said, and then there were guys who controlled everything. Oscar controlled everything. Today, when you watch big guards like Luka Doncic or oversized point forwards who blend scoring with passing, the roots trace back to Oscar, and Larry knew that. If Bird was the mind of the 1980s NBA, then Oscar Robertson was the mind before that, and Bird never forgot it. Larry Bird didn't throw praise around lightly. He was reserved, competitive, and focused, the kind of player who demanded excellence and rarely gave out compliments unless they were earned. So when Bird, even decades after retirement, consistently referred to Dennis Johnson as one of the greatest teammates he ever had, it wasn't just sentiment, it was a statement. Dennis Johnson was the best I ever played with, Bird once said plainly. No qualifiers, no hesitation. And when you look at DJ's career through Bird's eyes, it's easy to see why. Dennis Johnson wasn't the loudest player on the court. He didn't dominate highlight reels or rack up gaudy stats, but he won everywhere he went. And more than that, he stabilized. He brought calm when the moment demanded chaos, grit when the game demanded toughness, and trust, the rarest commodity in high-stakes basketball. By the time he arrived in Boston in 1983, Johnson had already won a title with the Seattle Supersonics and been named NBA Finals MVP in 1979. He had a reputation for locking up the league's toughest guards, Magic Johnson, Norm Nixon, even Julius Erving. But he wasn't just a defensive stopper. He was a thinker, a connector, the kind of player who could elevate stars without needing the spotlight himself. And that's exactly what Bird valued most. Bird didn't just need scoring next to him. He needed structure. He needed someone who could read the game, make the right pass, absorb pressure, and defend the toughest perimeter assignment so Bird could conserve energy for the other end. DJ became all of that and more. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't quick in a traditional sense. But Johnson had elite instincts, anticipation, and strength. He played angles better than almost anyone in the league. He didn't chase you. He showed up where you were going before you got there. In the 1984 NBA Finals, one of the most brutal and hard-fought series of the decade, Johnson's presence was indispensable. He guarded Magic. He orchestrated offense. He hit timely mid-range jumpers. But it was his ability to remain calm, to diffuse tension and bring structure, that stood out most. In Game 4 of that series, after Kevin McHale's infamous clothesline of Kurt Rambis triggered chaos on the court, it was DJ who helped refocus the Celtics. Bird got the headlines that night, but Johnson was the steadying hand, organizing the team, maintaining tempo, and executing plays in the half-court when everything else felt like mayhem. Bird would later say, "When things got tight, I wanted the ball in Dennis's hands. I knew he'd make the right decision. I trusted him with the game." That trust wasn't given lightly. Bird was as demanding of teammates as any superstar in NBA history. He respected work ethic, toughness, basketball IQ, and Johnson checked every box. Offensively, Johnson's numbers were modest, 12 to 14 points a night, 6 to 8 assists, a few rebounds. But Bird understood that not everything showed up in a box score. Johnson knew when to slow the pace, when to push, when to give Bird the ball early, and when to run the offense through someone else. His mid-range game, particularly from the wings and elbows, was money in clutch situations. He didn't need the ball often, but when it mattered, he didn't hesitate. In Game 5 of the 1987 Eastern Conference Finals against Detroit, the Celtics were down by 1 with just seconds left. Bird stole the inbounds pass, one of the most iconic plays in NBA history. But what often gets forgotten is what happened next. Bird, falling out of bounds, hit Johnson in stride with a left-handed pass. Johnson, without flinching, laid it in over 2 Pistons defenders to win the game. Bird got the steal, DJ got the bucket, and Bird knew, without Johnson's composure, that play goes nowhere. Years later, Bird reflected, "People always talk about that steal, but Dennis still had to make that layup. It wasn't easy, but he never panicked." Their relationship was built on respect. Bird admired Johnson's professionalism, his understanding of the game, and his ability to elevate others. Johnson, in turn, respected Bird's intensity, work ethic, and trust in him. They didn't need to speak much. They understood each other. They won together. When Johnson passed away suddenly in 2007, Bird was among the first to speak publicly, not as a former teammate, but as someone who had lost a genuine friend. He called DJ's death devastating and said the league had lost one of its true warriors. What made Johnson special in Bird's eyes wasn't just his defense, his IQ, or even his clutch ability. It was his total lack of ego. He didn't care about recognition. He just wanted to win, and he was willing to do everything, big or small, to make it happen. That, more than any stat or highlight, was what Larry Bird valued most.
That is, but Dennis makes me better. You know, that's why I say that, because he gets the ball to me in my spots. Tiny Archibald used to do that, but Dennis does it better than anybody I've ever played with.
When Larry Bird talks about greatness, he rarely emphasizes flash or fame. He talks about skill, toughness, purpose, and most of all, efficiency. That's why Kevin Durant, a modern scoring machine with old-school precision, earns a spot on Bird's list of most respected players. To Bird, Durant represents a kind of basketball that transcends eras. He's 7 feet tall with the fluidity of a guard. He doesn't dominate with brute strength or need a complex system to shine. He just plays smart, clean, and lethal. Bird wasn't prone to overhyping players, especially in today's NBA, where offense often outpaces defense. But Durant's game spoke Bird's language. It wasn't about likes or followers. It was about buckets, decision-making, and a relentless drive to master the craft. What stands out most to Bird, and to anyone watching with a technical eye, is the way Durant scores. Not just how much, but how. Whether he's curling off a pin down, isolating at the elbow, or walking into a transition three, Durant rarely forces shots. He reads the floor, picks his spot, rises up, and finishes. His footwork is crisp, his release is high and fast, and his understanding of angles is nearly unmatched. Bird once told a reporter, "You can't guard Durant with one guy. You can't really scheme him out. He gets to his spot, and once he does, it's too late." That kind of inevitability is something Bird understood from experience. As a player, he prided himself on doing the same, getting to his comfort zone and executing. But what impressed him even more was Durant's efficiency. KD wasn't jacking up 30 shots a game to get his numbers. He could get you 35 points on 18 shots. That kind of surgical scoring, Bird respected the hell out of that. In many ways, Durant embodies a skill-first ethos that's rare among stars of his stature. He's won 4 scoring titles, 2 Finals MVPs, and an MVP award, but he's never been labeled as selfish. His game is clean, minimalist even, no wasted motion, no unnecessary flash, just production. During his time with Golden State, Durant showcased that efficiency at the highest level. On a team already stacked with Hall of Famers, he didn't just fit in, he elevated them. He gave the Warriors a go-to weapon in crunch time and took on the toughest assignments on defense during the playoffs. Bird, a master of high-pressure basketball, took note. In the 2017 and 2018 NBA Finals, Durant averaged over 30 points per game against LeBron James and the Cavaliers on nearly 55% shooting. And it wasn't just the numbers. It was the poise, the decision-making, the calm with which he controlled the game. Bird valued that. In the 1980s, every possession mattered. You had to earn every inch. So when he saw Durant playing with that same intention, not just jacking up shots, but truly dissecting defenses, it stood out. There's also the intangible layer, how Durant handles noise. Bird played in a media environment that was tough, but relatively contained. Durant plays in a world of 24/7 takes, tweets, and constant surveillance. And while he's had his public battles, burner accounts, press conferences, social media skirmishes, on the floor, he's never wavered. He shows up, delivers, and walks away. That focus, that edge, Bird understood it. It's not just about what Durant scores, it's about how he breaks down your defense. Bird has spoken about how KD can stretch you out with his shooting, then collapse you with his drives. He can play in any system. He can run pick and roll or work off ball. He can post up smaller players and shoot over bigger ones. He doesn't rely on gimmicks or bailouts. He just outskills you. And defensively, while not often the headline, Durant's length and timing have made him a quietly strong presence on that end, especially during championship runs. His help-side rotations, contests, and ability to switch onto multiple positions made him more than just a scorer. Bird, who prided himself on playing both ends, saw that and appreciated it. He never believed in one-dimensional stars. To earn his respect, you had to commit to the full game. Durant did. What also earned Bird's admiration was Durant's journey. Coming back from a torn Achilles, one of the worst injuries for a player reliant on mobility and touch, and returning to elite form isn't just impressive, it's historic. In his first full season back, Durant averaged 29.9 points per game on nearly 52% shooting, 45% from 3, and 91% from the line, numbers that defy logic. Bird, who battled through back injuries and knows what it's like to have your body betray your talent, saw that resilience as the mark of greatness. Ultimately, Durant made Bird's list not just for talent, but for how he applied it. No wasted motion, no stat padding, just pure, high-level basketball. For Bird, who believed in doing your job with precision and pride, Kevin Durant wasn't just one of the best of his generation. He was one of the few modern players who could have thrived in any era. And that's the highest compliment Bird could give. Larry Bird never cared for hype. He never chased headlines, never inflated praise for the sake of spectacle. So when he calls LeBron James one of the greatest players ever, it's not just a compliment. It's a calculated endorsement. It means something. Bird didn't grow up watching highlight reels. He watched film. He studied habits. And when he talks about LeBron, what comes through is less about athleticism, though that part is obvious, and more about LeBron's command of the game. From the moment LeBron entered the NBA in 2003, Bird saw a different kind of player. Here was a 6'9", 250-pound forward who could run point, guard all 5 positions, and process the floor like a 15-year veteran. And he wasn't just putting up numbers, he was organizing chaos. Bird respected that. For Bird, basketball was always about control, controlling space, tempo, possessions. And LeBron? He doesn't just control games, he shapes them. His ability to slow down the pace when needed, to exploit mismatches, to manipulate defenses with just a glance. That's the kind of mastery Bird lived for. It's no surprise, then, that Bird never hesitated to include LeBron in conversations about all-time greats. He once said in an interview, "LeBron's the best all-around player I've ever seen." That wasn't an exaggeration. It was a direct appraisal. Bird valued versatility. He thrived on doing everything: scoring, passing, rebounding, defending. And he saw in LeBron a rare echo of that total game mindset. The numbers back it up. By the time LeBron passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the NBA's all-time leading scorer, he wasn't just climbing lists. He was redefining what sustained excellence looks like. Over 2 decades, LeBron had averaged 27-plus points, 7-plus rebounds, and 7-plus assists, with shooting efficiency and postseason success that rivaled any legend. But Bird didn't need a stat sheet to see it. He watched the tape. He saw how LeBron managed the game, not just in scoring, but in how he scored. In Miami, Bird noted how LeBron adapted his shot selection, became more efficient, trimmed the fat from his game. Cleveland, he saw a leader carry a city and deliver a championship with a 3-1 comeback in the finals, a performance Bird once described as all-time stuff. In LA, even in his 20th season, Bird watched LeBron anchor a team deep into the playoffs while still playing 38 minutes a night. But Bird didn't just respect LeBron's skill, he respected his durability. In an era of load management and shortened primes, LeBron's longevity stood out like a monument. Bird, whose career was shortened by back injuries, often spoke about how grueling the NBA calendar was. The flights, the road trips, the collisions. So watching LeBron at age 39, still leading fast breaks, absorbing contact, rotating on defense, it wasn't lost on him. More than anything, Bird admired how LeBron used his mind. Yes, the chase-down blocks and thunderous dunks made headlines, but Bird saw the real story in the subtleties. The way LeBron walked teammates through plays, the way he anticipated coverage, the way he saw angles that hadn't even opened yet. In a league often obsessed with highlight culture, Bird saw in LeBron a throwback, a student, a technician, someone who, despite the spotlight, never stopped working on the finer points. When LeBron started posting up more, Bird saw footwork evolution. When he became a stronger outside shooter, Bird saw hours in the gym. When he shifted to more off-ball action later in his career, Bird saw humility, the willingness to adapt, not demand. There's also the respect Bird held for LeBron's leadership. While they came from very different backgrounds and eras, Bird understood the weight of leading a franchise, the pressure, the scrutiny, the expectations. LeBron carried that in Cleveland, then Miami, then back to Cleveland, then LA. Each time, different rosters, different systems, and yet the same core result: contention, relevance, and often greatness. Bird had his rivalries with Magic, with Dr. J, with Isaiah, but with LeBron, the admiration didn't require on-court battles. It came from years of watching tape, reading tendencies, and recognizing genius. Bird didn't need to defend against LeBron to know what made him special. He saw it in the decisions, the control, the intelligence. And if we're talking about what Bird valued, not just who dominated, but who elevated, LeBron checks every box. He didn't just put up stats, he made everyone better. He didn't just play the game. He understood it at a level few ever do. So when Larry Bird lists his favorite players, LeBron's name doesn't show up as a token nod to modernity. It shows up because Bird saw in him the same thing he demanded from himself: excellence without shortcuts, mastery without gimmicks, dominance that wasn't always loud, but always undeniable. And to Bird, that matters more than anything.
I tell people, quit whining about LeBron. Enjoy him while he's here. He's unbelievable. I mean, he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest ever. Then you go back, I played against Magic, Michael, Kareem.
Because for all the talk about greatness, Larry Bird never needed flash to recognize impact. He respected players who thought the game, who elevated teammates, who never took possessions off. It's why LeBron makes his list. not because of highlight reels, but because of how he controls the floor like a master conductor. And Bird wasn't alone in that thinking. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, another all-time great with no patience for hype, built his list on those same values: vision, IQ, consistency. If you want to see who he considered the best to ever play the game and why, watch this next. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar names his 6 favorite basketball players. His picks might surprise you, and the reasoning behind them is even better. Please do subscribe to our channel for more videos, and also like the video and share your thoughts in comments section.